Hello, welcome in. This is the Bitcoin Escape Hatch, a Bitcoin-only educational channel where the signals, information, and the outcome, sorry, is financial freedom. This is not financial advice, just education. So, if you do decide to buy Bitcoin, make sure you send it to cold storage. My goal with this channel is to break down the walls of Bitcoin that feel like a lot when you're first learning about it. There's so much to learn. That's why I love it. And today, we're going to go in on a topic that I think hits closer to home than a lot more people realize, especially normies. And that's not a bad term. It's just people who have not yet woken up to Bitcoin. The topic, as the title of the video is, why we, you, me, and everybody you know needs Bitcoin. My reason for making this video is simple. To understand the solution, first, we need to understand the problem. And like I've said in previous videos, once you see the Fiat Ponzi and that cash is just something that gets printed to infinity and that only the people closest to the printer benefit and that the rest of us are just left with inflation, you can't go back. You just can't unsee the damage they've been causing every day since the inception of these federal banking systems. It's wild. So today, let's break it all down. I'm so glad you're here, and we're going to get into it. All right, if after this video, if even one person realizes that fiat is a rigged game against all of us, especially just normal middle-income people, and starts looking at Bitcoin as a solution, then my job is done. It's the whole point of this channel. We all know the endless headlines. Inflation cooling, 2 to 3%, economies recovering. But your groceries, rent, and bills keep climbing. Why is that? Who really benefits from this system where debt is the fuel and inflation is the exhaust? We all know, but we're going to get into it into detail. And how does something as simple as Bitcoin's 21 million fixed supply cap flip this script entirely? Bitcoin is the ultimate escape hatch from a brokered fiat system where central banks print unlimited amounts of money to prop up endless debt. By doing this, they erode your savings through hidden inflation. Ever wonder why things keep going up, but they keep telling us that inflation is okay? It's kind of wild. Bitcoin offers instead a decentralized fixed supply asset that no one can inflate, debase, or control. That's what I'm talking about. Bitcoin is the sound money revolution, where a predictable 21 million cap enforces scarcity like a digital gold, shielding individuals from the fiat Ponzi scheme that's drowning the world in massive debt, while governments and banks siphon wealth from the productive. Bitcoin is humanity's best shot at sovereign money, ownerless, borderless, and unprintable in a world where fiat currencies are weapons of mass wealth destruction. Bitcoin is the reason why you can opt out of trusting central planners who've turned economies into debt-fueled illusions. This makes Bitcoin the antidote to inflation, theft, and financial repression. Fiat has no limits and no accountability. Instead, there's an infinite money printer controlled by a handful of central banks and governments. This printer, or quantitative easing, stimulus packages, bailouts, spending bills, whenever the government spends money, they print it, right? They're not making enough money. They're not collecting enough tax receipts because their debt is so high. Their debt service cost is so high. So anytime they need to spend more money, they print it. This floods the system with new dollars, euros, or whatever currency there is every time there's a crisis or an election, right? They love to spend that money. But who pays the price? Short answer, I'm sure you know, you and me, everybody you know and love. Through inflation that silently taxes your savings, wages that lag behind costs, and debt spirals that future generations will inherit. Your children. I'm big on analogies, so here we go. Imagine the fiat system as a leaky bucket. Picture your personal finances as a bucket you're trying to fill with hard-earned water, money. Central banks, they're the ones poking holes in the bottom, letting water leak out via inflation. Actually, inflation is usually around 2 to 3%. That's their sweet spot, right? In the US and Canada, which they say that it is around that point recently, sounding tame after the 2022 peaks. Yet over the past 5 years, the cumulative inflation has eroded purchasing power by 23 to 25% and 20 to 22% in Canada. So 23% in the US, 20 to 22% in Canada. So they're still, even over 5 years, when they're telling you everything is great, inflation is 2 to 3%, once that compounds over that 5 years, you're already paying a 20% inflation, which is so wild. Essentials tell the true story. Food prices surged with annual rates over 9% in 2022, and shelter inflation stayed sticky at 3 to 6% in many years, far outpacing wages for most. This is why these numbers might not feel like they're fully captured. So when you hear about these CPI numbers or inflation numbers and you're wondering why groceries are still insane, this is why. CPI uses a fixed basket. It's not always fixed. Sometimes they change the items in there and the way it's weighted as a percentage. With weighted averages and adjustments, hedonic quality for goods. It includes cheaper items also, like electronics, that offsets rises in the essentials, like your food, your rent, and your clothes. You see where I'm going with that? So headline CPI can feel lower than your personal experience, and that's why it feels like everything is so crazy. Even though they're telling you everything is fine, even when they say, "Oh, look, we're down 0.1% inflation this month, so everything should be good." It's not. Later on, we're going to talk about how it compounds no matter what the number is. All right. Critics say weights or methodologies understate housing and food for most households. Makes sense. Official averages mask these pains because they include cheaper gadgets like electronics and streaming services and all that other stuff, or even volatile energy, but not your groceries, not your personal rent, not your personal bills, which is wild. They're the leaks that are draining your hard earned water in your bucket. And this is why Bitcoin's fixed supply is revolutionary. No central bank can dilute or quietly poke holes in your bucket. Governments are the borrowers, dipping into an endless well, the printing press, to fill massive reservoirs of debt. The US alone is at $38.5 trillion of debt, and that number is just so wild. I always encourage people to go look at the debt clock website of their countries, and it's insane. So that's about 120 to 124% of GDP. Japan, 230, Italy, 135, France, 113, the UK, 95, China, 88. These are just rough averages. And why are these numbers important? Well, I'm going to do a little explainer on what debt to GDP is. It's the ratio that shows how much a country or the world owes compared to the total value of everything it produces in a year. That's gross domestic product. Think of it like a personal finances. If you owe $94,700, but only earn $100,000 annually, it's manageable but getting heavy, and your debt to GDP would be 94%. Over 100% debt to GDP means the debt exceeds one full years of economic output, which means their debt costs more than they make in a year. That list I just mentioned, it's just wild. It makes it harder to pay down something with strong growth or start making tough choices like they tell us to do in Canada. Historically, ratios above 77 to 90% for long periods can slow growth, but it depends on factors like who holds the debt and the interest rates. Who is the debt owed to, right? I've heard this topic come up a lot, or this question. Government debt isn't owed to some mysterious they or them organization. It's mostly owed to everyday people, institutions, and even parts of the government itself, which is wild to think about it. Imagine you own your own debt. For example, in the US, with their $38.5 trillion and growing by the second, about 20% of it is intragovernmental. One government agency like Social Security lending to another. The more I'm just gonna take a second here. The more and more you learn about how this financial system is set up, the more and more just crazy it seems. If you were to say, put yourself in a situation that the government is like, okay, what if I did what the government does with this money? It would be wild. You'd be sent to jail and never be let out. Anyways, so 20% is intergovernmental, which the government owns, and while the remaining 80% is held by the public, American banks, pension funds, mutual funds, the Federal Reserve, individual investors, and foreign entities. So these are government bonds they're talking about. Japan and China are the biggest foreign holders, but together, foreigners only own about 30% of the public portion. In Japan, this is just an example, with the world's highest debt to GDP ratio, over 90% is owned domestically by its own banks, insurance companies, and citizens. This means when the governments keep borrowing money and printing money to pay interest or roll over their debt, they're effectively transferring wealth from savers and future taxpayers, right, through inflation and higher future taxes, to current bond holders, often the same financial institutions and wealthy asset owners who benefit most from the system, right? It's just one giant wheel of sadness whenever they start printing money. Bitcoin changes its dynamic entirely. Its fixed 21 million supply means no one can create more to pay off debts or bail out the system, protecting your savings from the hidden inflation tax that erodes fiat money when governments lean on the printing press to manage what they owe. And let's be honest, they just love to print money no matter what. I've said this a few times now. Inflation is often called a hidden tax. And why? Because it quietly reduces your purchasing power of your money. It's not a tax that they're taking out of your bank account. It's just the amount of money in your bank buys less. Yeah, so this reduces the purchasing power of your money without any direct bill from the government, like I just said, effectively transferring wealth in ways that benefits debitors like governments or hurting savers and fixed income earners. Think of yourself and, even more sadly, retirees. When prices rise across the economy, inflation, the same dollars buy fewer goods and services, right? Think about more money chasing the same amount of things. And that's what makes inflation go up. For example, if inflation is 3% annually, $100 in your savings today will buy about $97 worth of stuff next year. In real terms, you've lost 3% of your money's value. You wouldn't think that that's bad, but that's still bad because every year it compounds, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So, what about if we were to roll that ahead 5 years? That means your $100 today will have the purchasing power of about $86.26 in 5 years. In real terms, you've lost approximately 13% of your money's value. So, what about 30 years, right? We're all hoping to retire sometime. In the last 30 years, from 1995 to 2025, prices have risen by a factor of approximately 2.15. They've doubled. Prices have doubled. This is what cumulative inflation does. And that 2 to 3% annually over 30 years is 105 to 115% inflation. And just imagine that. Some places do actually experience that within a month, which is so wild. But this is why it's a hidden tax. Is over time you don't feel it. Like we've all heard this phrase a million times, is the pot of boiling frogs, right? They're boiling you alive. It's just so crazy. Your $100 from 30 years ago would now have the same purchasing power of about $46 to $49 today. In real terms, you've lost 50% of your money's regional average if held in cash. This is why the wealthy hold assets and borrow. This should be very alarming because think about your retirement, as I just mentioned. If you're planning on having an X amount of dollars or promised fixed income when you retire, how much is it actually going to buy in 20, 30, or 40 years when you do decide to retire? So think about that. If you're in your head, you think I'm going to have this much money when I retire. From now until then, if they keep printing, that amount of money is going to be worth so much less. The nominal amount will be the same, but the amount it buys will be so much less, right? If it continues and it actually is going to get higher, I believe inflation in dollar terms will be higher over the next few years, then you're going to need a lot more, or an asset that can't be debased or inflated. Modern society runs on this debt engine. And governments borrow to fund wars and welfare and so on, and banks create money out of thin air by fractional reserves. You get a loan for a house, cars, and educations, and then you're just stuck paying that debt for the rest of your life. It's kind of crazy how they're now proposing longer term loans on things like houses and so on, and it's just wild. This erosion acts like a tax on cash holdings, bank savings, or any fixed nominal assets, and you're left poorer without having spent a cent. You haven't even done anything and you're poorer. Governments and central banks can contribute to inflation by increasing the money supply through the same printing, quantitative easing, funding, and spending bills and deficits. This seigniorage allows them to finance operations indirectly. New money dilutes the value of existing currency, reducing the real burden of their debt, right? If their money is worth less, their debt is easy to pay. They repay loans with cheaper dollars while collecting more nominal revenue from taxes as wages and prices rise. Wages don't usually rise, but I'm sure everybody's gotten that inflation raise. The cost falls on everybody else holding money, especially savers, wage earners whose pays lag behind prices, and those on fixed incomes, making it regressive, hitting lower and middle income households harder as they hold more cash to relative assets. That's why rich people always tell you to hold assets, right? It's hidden because there's no vote in Congress, no explicit rate, and no line on your tax return. Yet the effect is real, right? You don't see it, you definitely feel it, but there's no physical thing for you to go. There's no website for you to go and see the actual costs of the things that you spend money on, because it's very personal, especially when it comes to groceries and food and living and all that other stuff. Anyways, let's continue. Over time, this compounds dramatically. The US dollar, I've said this in many videos before, has lost 96% of its purchasing power since 1913 due to cumulative inflation, which is they've just been printing money ever since the Federal Reserve has been created. Even a moderate target inflation, like the Fed's 2% goal, steadily taxes savers if returns don't keep pace, right? You always hear people say if you're not beating inflation, you're falling behind. That's so true, because it's just cumulative. Every month it just keeps going up and compounds. In short, inflation isn't just rising prices. It's a stealthy wealth transfer that punishes prudent savers and rewards borrowing, often enabling bigger governments without overt tax hikes. You ever notice how rich politicians become over time? It's this thing called the Cantillon Effect, and we'll cover that in a little bit as well. Corporations and consumers join in, living on credit cards, mortgages, and loans because easy money policies make borrowing cheap until interest rates bite back, right? When inflation runs hot, the Fed raises interest rates and everything goes up. Just think about all these people who bought homes during, and I'm not going to say what era it was, during 2020 and 2023 at near 0% interest rates, and they're renewing into 6% interest rates because inflation went up and interest rates went up. Now they're paying for it, and it's not sad. It should have been smarter, but yeah, it's brutal. When the bucket springs too many leaks, recessions, bubbles bursting, they just print more water, diluting everyone's share, right? They just keep pouring more water into that bucket. And as they pour more water, more holes spring out everywhere. The result, we're all on a treadmill, chasing depreciating money, while the elite who own assets get richer as inflation pumps stocks and real estate. The beauty of Bitcoin, it's sealed, unbreakable vault with exactly 21 million units ever, no holes, no dilution. You fill it once, it stays full, appreciating as demand grows in a finite system. There's no permission needed to hold it, no fees to governments for stimulus, just math, code enforcing scarcity. All you need to pay for is your wallet. That's it. And this is what makes Bitcoin essential. In a fiat world where debt is encouraged, Bitcoin rewards saving. No one can print more to bail out the reckless, so your stack grows in value over time. HODL. Bitcoin is the ultimate opt-out. It doesn't create debt, it defies it. While fiat chains you to inflation, Bitcoin sets you free. And this is why we all sound like fanatics, all us Bitcoin maxis. This inequality isn't random. It's baked into how new money enters the system. And like I mentioned before, I wanted to cover this. It's called the Cantillon Effect. When central banks print trillions, quantitative easing, stimulus, spending bills, bailouts, whatever they need, whenever they find a reason to print money, this is what happens. The fresh money doesn't rain down equally on everyone. It flows first to banks, Wall Street, large corporations, and governments, the people and institutions closest to the money printer, right? Only makes sense. They get to spend or invest this new money before prices rise across the economy, buying assets like stocks, real estate, or luxury goods at yesterday's lower prices. And then once all that money finally trickles down after years, their wealth explodes because the asset prices go up. Only later does the money reach everyday workers through wages or small business revenue. By then, prices have already gone up, right? This is why people can't keep up with inflation, even with raises. You pay more for groceries, rent, and gas, but your salary hasn't caught up. Savers lose the most, watching their cash quietly debase. Well, I'm not sure people actually watch it, but they definitely feel it. It's a hidden wealth transfer from the bottom and middle to the top, all without a single new tax law being passed. That's why it's just a silent killer. The Cantillon Effect turns inflation into a regressive tax that widens the wealth gap every time the printer runs. This isn't capitalism, it's cronyism. Bailout for banks in 2008, trillions printed in 2020, all devaluing your labor while pumping asset prices for those closest to the spigot, the money printer. Inflation isn't natural, it's policy. Without it, governments couldn't afford endless deficits. Just imagine this. If governments couldn't print money, if there wasn't a computer in the basement of the Federal Reserve where they could just change a few keys and add more money to the system, they would need to find actual constructive, real fixes for the issues in the world and in the economy. And I think that a lot of the issues that we run into is because they've never fixed issues previously, and they've just been printing since 1913. This debt addiction leads to booms and busts. Remember 2008, like I was just mentioning, or the 2022 crypto winter triggered by fiat rate hikes. Remember, whenever inflation goes up, the rate hikes go up. So in short, fiat is a house of cards built on trust in printers. It rewards debitors, punishes savers, and centralizes power to the unelected bankers, right? Remember, the Federal Reserve is not a federal entity and has no reserves. Now let's talk about why Bitcoin's fixed supply is the ultimate solution. Because the genius of Satoshi's design is that it's hard codes scarcity into the money, making debasement impossible. If you caught my mining or node episodes, if anyone bad actor tried to go and propose a change, like a block that with more Bitcoin than it rewarded, or change the supply, the nodes would notice it immediately, will alert every other node in the system and ban that sender. And it wouldn't go anywhere. And people have tried. How fiat breaks and Bitcoin fixes it using the leaky bucket analogy, me and my analogies. Imagine the global economy as that leaky bucket, with fiat pouring in endlessly, leaking value. Suppose governments want to stimulate, they print trillions, the multi-trillions from 2020 to 2025, 40% of the total supply, which is, when I first heard that number, this is what I keep repeating, it's just so wild that they added 40% of the money that has ever existed in those 5 years. Anyways, this supply spiked inflation to 9%, and I believe it was much higher. Things like groceries and rent and homes and energy to heat your home, it was much closer to double digits, in my opinion. Here's exactly what happens step by step in bucket terms. Step 1, central banks lower rates, print money, bucket overflows temporarily, but holds inflation wide, and right, every time they print, inflation goes up. When there's more money chasing the same amount of goods, and prices rise. Step 2, debt soars. US added 1 to 2 trillion yearly, now diluting the water's purity. Purchasing power drops 20 to 30% per decade. Whenever they add new money, the amount your money buys is worth less. Step 3, to fix it, they raise interest rates. If they want to curb inflation, they raise interest rates, popping bubbles and hurting the average person with higher borrowing costs. Those people with mortgages that I just mentioned, we're going to see a lot of blood in the water this year in 2026. But people rebel via strikes, votes, or worse, so they print again. It's a vicious cycle. Bitcoin, its 21 million fixed supply cap has never changed. It halves every 4 years. Not the supply cap, the mining rewards half every 4 years. Just wanted to make that clear distinction there. As for Bitcoin, it's never changed. It's a supply cap is baked into digital stone. Imagine if the dollar had a supply cap that could never be changed. Where would we be? No leaks. You hold Bitcoin, demand rises. As fiat fails, value compounds. No central bank can inflate it away. No one can. Even if governments try to ban it, and they have. I think China's on attempt 20 now or something like that. Bitcoin's decentralized network, nodes, miners worldwide, routes around censorship. You can't ban code. Bottom line, Bitcoin turns money into a store of value, not a tool for control. It's sound money reborn, like gold, but better. Divisible, portable, verifiable. All right, just a bit of numbers as of January 2026. Bitcoin's total supply in circulation right now is 19.97 million circulating, while fiat printers churn billions daily. No wonder Bitcoin's performance over the last 5 years has been strong despite last year, a down year for 2025. No big deal. Stack those sats. HODL. That's why Bitcoin isn't just an investment. It's a necessity. Hold fiat, lose to inflation. Hold Bitcoin, preserve and grow wealth. Now let's get into single biggest misconception about Bitcoin, which I've covered before, and that it's volatile. Bitcoin's volatility is a feature in a broken system. It's the price of uncensorable scarcity in a world addicted to printing. Meanwhile, fiat stability is an illusion. Losing 90% of your purchasing power over decades while governments default via inflation, that's not stability. That's very volatile. That is just so crazy. Bitcoin empowers individuals. Fiat enslaves them to debt. It's not risky to opt out. It's risky to stay in. The pattern is always the same. Fiat promises growth but delivers inequality and crises. Bitcoin promises nothing but enforces rules. No bailouts, no inflations, pure merit, and code. That accessibility turns anyone with a phone into a sovereign saver, and sovereignty builds resilience faster than any stimulus ever could. That's anti-fragility in action. You don't have to be a whale to benefit from Bitcoin. In 2026, stacking Bitcoin is easier than ever. Grab a wallet, any online wallet, but as I always say on this channel, if you're going to buy Bitcoin, send it to cold storage. That's the true self-sovereignty. That nervousness are you going to get when you send the transaction and you're waiting for it? It's a really interesting feeling, and once it lands, it's the best feeling. All right? If you're going to buy Bitcoin, send it to cold storage. But even if you start small, the winning move for 99% of us is simple. Learn about Fiat's flaws. Then understand the fix with Bitcoin. Stack sats regularly, DCA dollar cost average with whatever you can, $10, $20, whatever you can. Then hold long term while the world wakes up. We're still so early, like really early. Central banks print the money, governments spend it into oblivion. You get the inflation bill. That's the fiat trap. That's the real trap. 7 things to burn into your brain. Fiat is infinite. Bitcoin is finite. Choose scarcity, right? Bitcoin has no top because fiat has no bottom. Number 2, debt fuels fiat economies. Bitcoin rewards savers. Number 3, inflation steals your time. Bitcoin preserves it. This is one thing I wanted to just stop at. When you go to work and you trade your time for money that the government can just print, your time, your one and only true valuable resource, you trade that for money they just print out of thin air. That is crazy. That is just so wild. And that's why when I put this in there, I worded it as inflation steals your time, the only time you have left on this planet. Please study Bitcoin. Number 4, central control breeds corruption, right? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. If you had the power to print money at will, I think everybody would just keep printing it. Decentralization ensures freedom. Number 5, nations are drowning in debt. Bitcoin offers an arc. And I've heard that being said before. I can't remember who said it, but I loved it. Number 6, you do not need permission. There's a 0 bar to entry. Anybody can join the network. And that's one of the most amazing things. And it's my number one thing that I love about Bitcoin. Anybody can join. When I was first learning, I was like, oh, I need to be this expert and be able to learn how to do this, that, and the next thing. Grab your phone, go to YouTube, type in, how do I buy Bitcoin? Don't worry about which exchange you're going to use first. Just make sure it's reputable, right? Make sure, if you can, that it's Bitcoin only, and send it to cold storage. Start there. Start with $10. Start with $5, and then see where you go, and just keep going. All right? You do not need permission. Just start stacking. Number 7, by 2140, when the last Bitcoin is mined, fiat will be history. At that point, Bitcoin will be enduring. Bitcoin will be running on transaction fees and activity alone. And it is going to be glorious because by that point, the entire world or even multiple planets will be using Bitcoin. That's just my crazy theory. If this video convinces even one person to escape the fiat matrix and embrace Bitcoin as sound money, my job is done. And as always, remember, if you do decide Bitcoin, as I've said a few times in this video, send it to cold storage. Please send it to cold storage. Take self-custody. Run your own node, verify the truth for yourself, be a truth keeper, and let Bitcoin do what it does best. Be unstoppable. Stay sovereign, friends. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.